The state of Louisiana has exonerated a man who has been incarcerated for nearly 3 decades for a murder that he did not commit in the 1980s. This is 64-year-old Glenn Ford. He'll never get those years back, but of course he's happy to be exonerated. He maintained his innocence since the beginning of his conviction. However, no one believed him. He tried to appeal the case several times. No one was even considering taking up his appeal, but now there's evidence to prove his innocence, and thankfully he will be set free. Now, there were a number of inconsistencies that led to his exoneration. Last Thursday, prosecutors filed a motion to vacate Ford's conviction and sentence, saying that in late 2013, credible evidence came to their attention supporting a finding that Ford was neither present at nor a participant in the robbery and murder of a jeweler by the name of Isadore Rozeman.
They had picked him because he did yard work occasionally for Rozeman. And so there's 2 angles to this story. One is racial and one is generally about the death penalty. Now, his jury was all white, and the prosecutors had information that could have actually helped his cause. They hid it, okay? And it turns out the 2 guys who did it, including now we have an informant who said he talked to the guy who confessed to it, which Anna will explain in a second, okay? 2 guys who did it were actually white, okay? And they, at the time, not just now, at the time, they had credible evidence that it was those guys. Instead, they're like, okay, who's the closest black guy we could find to this guy?
The guy who does yard work.
Yeah, he does his yard work every once in a while. Let's pick that guy. He wasn't at the scene. There was nothing connecting him. They're like, good enough. We can connect him in some way. He did yard work for him. It must have been him.
Such a miscarriage of justice, and it makes you so depressed to know that this man's life was completely ruined. I mean, I'm sure a lot of times you hear these stories about people that have been exonerated after serving decades behind bars, and they're just so happy to be out that they don't want to look back, and they somehow convince themselves to live a happy life. But I mean, his life was ruined. You took 30 years of this man's life away from him simply because of his skin color, because the prosecutors obviously had a bias here, and that's another thing that I don't understand, right? The real person who actually committed this murder, who actually shot this jeweler, is out there and he's free. But instead of focusing on that, you're allowing your own biases to go after a completely innocent man. You're ignoring evidence. There was a confession. Okay, the person who confessed to it was a man by the name of Jake Robinson. He confessed to it and prosecutors were like, nah, whatever.
Yeah. Now, look, they've been trying to get this information out for decades. Finally, he got an evidentiary hearing in 2000. He's released all the way in 2013, right? And at that point, they had evidence that the prosecutor suppressed information about Jake and Henry Robinson, these 2 white brothers who were initially implicated in the crime. Now, finally, the prosecutor says, well, if we had all the information and it was presented to the jury, they might not have even arrested or indicted him, let alone convicted him, let alone put him on death row, okay? But one of the reasons that prosecutors do it is not just because they're viciously racist at the time, right? But because it's easier.
It's an open and shut case for them.
I'll have an all-white jury. It'll be super easy to convict this black guy. If I put a white guy on the stand, well, it's going to be harder. Some people are going to relate to him, yada, yada. And let's just wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. Who cares? Who cares? Who cares who's right? Who cares that guy was murdered? We do the death penalty because what? We want justice? No, we want some sort of bloody vengeance, right? And it doesn't have to be on the right person, as long as the masses are appeased. Now, so let's get to the death penalty. Now, I was an advocate of the death penalty, and I believe in deterrence, and sometimes I even believe in vengeance, okay? So maybe I'm not a good guy, and I'm certainly not a liberal on that issue, okay? But I changed my mind. Why? Because we're applying it wrong, because we keep letting go people who are on death row when it turns out they didn't do it. Now it's happened dozens of times. Now it happens again. What kind of a person, faced with that evidence, says, I'm still in favor of the death penalty, even though we consistently have the wrong guys on death row? What kind of an animal would still be in favor of the death penalty? Even if you're like me and you say, hey, you know what? I don't mind the vengeance, okay? Look, if it happened to my family member, I'd want justice, right? But I'd want justice on the right guy. I wouldn't want to kill someone else who didn't do it. You'd have to be an animal. You'd have to be the same kind of murderer that you want executed to be okay with killing the wrong guy. As it is applied today in America, if you're a quarter of a way decent human being, you cannot be in favor of the death penalty. It's an open and shut case. If you are, you really got to check what kind of person you are, man. You got to look inside yourself and see if you have any shred of morality or decency. How can you be comfortable with executing the wrong people? All throughout the 30 years, they're telling this guy, hey, listen, hey, Glenn Ford, just admit it, man. And your conscience will be clear, And he's like, I'm not going to admit it, man, because I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Oh, sure you didn't do it. Sure you didn't do it. But he's like, but no, really, I didn't do it, and I'm not going to admit something I didn't do, right? And he resists that pressure for 30 years, right? And of course, it turns out he was correct. And then I'm reminded of the story we did on Fox News the other day, where Bill O'Reilly and Bernie Goldberg were talking about how Obama has it so easy with the liberal media, and he never gets any criticism because he's black. Everybody loves black people, and they never want to criticize them. You see how black people have rose petals thrown at their feet all day long. Glenn Ford, nearly died from all the rose petals that were thrown at his feet. So I know there's no racism in the country. And everybody that was convicted back in 1983, back in the 1970s, back in the 1960s, they're all guilty of sin, and you're 100% sure of it, I know.
Just to give you a scope of how bad the problem is, the Republican governor in Illinois a few years ago put a moratorium on all death penalties because they did a study, and it was a shade under or maybe over 50% of the people who are on death row not guilty.
Yeah.
50%. That's unconscionable.
Look, I'm not proud that it took me so long to get to that conclusion based on facts that had been accumulating. But it was at that point where I said, oh my God, 50%, Jesus Christ. I mean,
I know, but
is there any margin of error you could live with if it's the death penalty? I don't know. That's a really, really good question. But it certainly ain't fucking 50%.
And there's something admirable about the fact that you're willing to take that information and change your stance based on that information. On the other side, you have advocates for the death penalty who will be given this information and they refuse to budge because they believe they're being tough on crime. And they're usually the most conservative lawmakers or the most conservative people living in the country, the same people that will point their fingers at women and say, no, you don't deserve reproductive rights. We believe in the right to life. You believe in the right to life, and then at the same time you advocate for the death penalty, knowing that a huge chunk of people that have been killed or are going to be killed as a result of the death penalty should be exonerated because of DNA evidence.
I'm pro-life, except for the 50% of people I accidentally killed when they were perfectly innocent.